In Frindle today, we're going to read chapters 3 and 4. Make sure that while I'm reading to you, you're thinking about what section of your book log that you want to fill in. So, chapter 3 is called The Question. The first day of school was always Get Acquainted Day. Books were passed out and there was a lot of chatter. Everyone asked, "What did you do over the summer?" Periods 1 through 6 went by very smoothly for Nick. But then came period 7. Miss Granger's class was all business. So you may not know this, but when you get into middle school and high school, sometimes they call the classes that you switch into, they call them periods. I think in high school they actually call them blocks, but in middle school they might call them periods. I don't know. The first thing they did was take a vocabulary pretest to see how many of the 35 words for the week the kids already knew. Tremble, circular, orchestra, the list went on and on. Nick knew most of them. Then there was a handout about class procedures. After that, there was a review paper about cursive writing. And then there was a sample sheet showing how the heading should look on every assignment. No let-up for 37 minutes straight. Nick was an expert at asking the delaying question, also known as the teacher stopper, or the guaranteed time waster. At 3 minutes before the bell, in that split second between the end of today's classwork and the announcement of tomorrow's homework, Nick could launch a question guaranteed to sidetrack the teacher long enough to delay or even wipe out the homework assignment. Timing was important, but asking the right question, that was the hard part. Questions about stuff in the news, questions about the college the teacher went to, questions about the teacher's favorite book or sport or hobby, Nick knew all the tricks, and he had been very successful in the past. Here he was in 5th grade, near the end of his very first language arts class with Miss Granger, and Nick could feel a homework assignment coming the way a farmer can feel a rainstorm. Miss Granger paused to catch her breath, and Nick's hand shot up. She glanced down at her seating chart and then up at him. Her sharp gray eyes were not even tuned up to half power. "Yes, Nicholas?" "Miss Granger, you have so many dictionaries in this room, and that huge one especially. Where did all those words come from? Did they just get copied from other dictionaries? It sure is a big book." It was the perfect thought grenade. Kapow! Several kids smiled, and a few peeked at the clock. Nick was famous for this, and the whole class knew what he was doing. Unfortunately, so did Miss Granger. She hesitated a moment and gave Nick a smile that was just a little too sweet to be real. Her eyes were the color of a thundercloud. "Why, what an interesting question, Nicholas. I could talk about that for hours, I bet." She glanced around the classroom. "Do the rest of you want to know too?" Everyone nodded yes. "Very well then, Nicholas. Will you do some research on that subject and give a little oral report to the class? If you find out the answer yourself, it will mean so much more than if I just told you. Please have your report ready for the next class." Uh-oh. Did his plan work? He actually got more work than less. Miss Granger smiled at him again, very sweetly. Then it was back to business. "Now the homework for tomorrow can be found on page 12 of your Words Alive book." Nick barely heard the assignment. His heart was pounding, and he felt small, very small. He could feel the tops of his ears glowing red. A complete shutdown. An extra assignment. And probably a little black mark next to his name on the seating chart. Everything he had heard about this teacher was true. Don't mess around with the Lone Granger. We're reading chapter 4 also, which is called Word Detective. It was a beautiful September afternoon. Bright sun, cool breeze, blue sky. But not for Nick. Nick had to do a little report for the next day. plus copy out all the definitions for 35 words for Miss Granger. This was not the way school was supposed to work, not for Nick. There was a rule at Nick's house, homework first, and that meant right after school. Do any of you have that rule in your house, homework first? It might not apply this year, but it might have applied previously when you went to school, and that could be a connection that you could make. Nick had heard his older brother James groan and grumble about this rule for years, right up until he graduated from high school 2 years ago. And then James wrote home from college after his first semester and said, "My grades are looking great because I came here and I already know how to put first things first." The letter was the proof that Nick's mom and dad had been looking for. Homework first was the law from September to June. This had never bothered Nick before because he hardly ever had homework. Oh, sure, he looked over his spelling words on Thursday nights, and there had been a few short book reports in 4th grade, but other than that, nothing. Up to now, schoolwork never spilled over into his free time. Thanks to Miss Granger, those days were gone. First, he looked up the definitions in the brand new red dictionary that his mom had brought because Miss Granger told her to. It took almost an hour. He could hear a baseball game in John's yard down the street, yelling and shouting, and every few minutes the sharp crack of a bat connecting with a pitch. But he had a report to do for Miss Granger. Nick looked at the very front of the dictionary. There was an introduction to the book called Words and Their Origins. Perfect, Nick thought. It was just what he needed to do his report. It would all be over in a few minutes. Nick could already feel the sun and the breeze on his face as he ran outside to play, homework all done. And there's Nick, making sure to do his homework first. Doesn't look too happy. Then he read the first sentence from the introduction. Without question, this modern American dictionary is one of the most surprisingly complex and profound documents ever to be created, for it embodies unparalleled etymological detail, reflecting not only superb lexicographic scholarship, but also the dreams and speech and imaginative talents of millions of people over thousands of years. For every person who has ever spoken or written in English has had a hand in its making. Now, I don't know about you, but there were some pretty big words in there, some of which Miss Bridges had a hard time pronouncing. Etymological and lexicographic. Yeah, those are some pretty hard words. So maybe you want to look those words up and put them on the words that you don't know part of your book log. Copy down the sentence from the book. You'll have to rewind, go back and listen to it a few times to get it copied down, and then look it up and write the definition in your own words. What? Nick scratched his head and read it again. And then again. Not much better. It was sort of like trying to read the ingredients on a shampoo bottle. He slammed the dictionary shut and walked downstairs. Nick's family did a lot of reading, so bookshelves covered 3 of the 4 walls in the family room. There were 2 sets of encyclopedias. The black set was for grown-ups and the red set was for kids. Nick pulled out the D volume from the red set and looked up dictionary. There were 3 full pages with headings like Early Dictionary, Word Detective, and Dictionaries Today. Not very exciting. But he had to do it, so Nick just plopped down on the couch and read all of it. And when he finished with the kids' book, he opened up the black encyclopedia and read most of what it said about dictionaries, too. He understood only about half of what he read. He leaned back on the couch and covered his eyes with his arm, trying to imagine himself giving a report on all this boring stuff. He'd be lucky to have 3 minutes worth. But because Nick was Nick, he suddenly had an idea, and it brought a grin to his face. Nick decided that giving his report could actually be fun. He could make it into something special. After all, Miss Granger had asked for it. So, we talked about some words maybe you didn't know in there. We talked about a connection possibly you could have made. You could also draw a picture or do a graphic organizer of the favorite part that you heard me read today, or you could summarize what you heard me read today. That was a little bit longer of a piece that I read out of the book since it was 2 chapters combined. So it's got a little bit more in there that you could summarize. But make sure you pick one section from your book log to complete from today's readings.